Lockdown Lessons is a new series where we come and talk to businesses about their experience during COVID-19. We're here today at Loaf Pottery in Crawfordsburn, where we're going to talk to Maeve Monaghan, who's CEO of the Now Group. Let's go inside. The words challenging and unprecedented have never been used as much as they have in the last 6 months, so we'll try to avoid those. But could you tell us, if we go right back to March probably, could you tell us the sort of impact that the initial lockdown had on the business and what measures you introduced?
Yeah, well, I suppose even reflecting on it, it's hard to believe what's happened in that time. You know, I was thinking back on it last night in preparation for our talk today, and I think it was such an immediate shock, because even, I suppose when you look at Now Group as an organisation, we have a range of services and a range of social enterprises. So when we heard it first around COVID and the kind of challenges that were coming along the way, the major priority was to keep our staff and our participants safe. So there was quite a bit of work around making sure that we got everybody off site, we got people supported, and we kept our staff safe, or safe I should say. But then we also run a range of catering businesses, and I think, I don't think I've still got over the shock of them closing and that business stopping so quickly. So we were, with Loaf Catering for instance, we were on a real growth trajectory, and we had real plans for growth and development, and we were really struggling to keep up with that. And then when COVID hit and the lockdown happened, all the business stopped so quickly. So I think for us, the thing that's kept me on course is that continued focus on keeping our staff safe, our participants safe, and looking at sustainability. And that's why it's so good to talk to you about this today, because that sustainability, financial sustainability, and keeping true to our values has probably been the thing we've been working on most. And
I think most businesses will admit that they've faced a lot of challenges over the last while, people challenges being the main one. Given the nature of your business, I suppose that you were facing challenges that not many other businesses were facing in terms of how do you ensure the minimum personal impact on the people that you're dealing with in the business? And can you tell us a little bit about how that felt?
So I suppose that's true, because we have 3 groups of people to look after. Our staff, who were amazing during this, and I think we've learned a lot about working better together, I think, through this, and we'll maybe talk a bit more about that later. But then our participants, so we support over 1,000 people with learning difficulties and autism. They live mostly in the Greater Belfast area, but right across the north. So we've got the geographical challenge, and then for those people, the change in routine is a big challenge. And I must say, I have been genuinely very impressed by the adaptability of our staff first of all, and our participants. And I suppose that the main thing for us and their parents and carers for them was to try to keep themselves safe, and you know, I suppose stopping people accessing our sites was easy enough to do. The next stage, I suppose, was about making sure that we kept that contact up, and actually I'm just really delighted to say that we probably have more contact and a better relationship between our staff and our participants now than we've had ever before. And a lot of that's to do with the fact that we've got quite a significant online presence. So our training team and our employment team set up virtual job search groups. We do a lot of kind of softer skills. We've done a really good range of cookery classes. So for instance, we support about 60 very vulnerable families where the mum or dad, or the mum certainly, possibly the dad as well, has a learning difficulty or autism, and they are living at home during COVID with their children, and many of those families, the children have disabilities as well. And we were really concerned about them and them being able to look after themselves and be safe in their mental health during that time. So we've done a really good package where we deliver a package of food to them with a recipe chart with it and a video that teaches them how to cook their meals. And we've found that people are maybe more resilient now than we thought, and there's lots of learning for us around enabling people more rather than doing things for them. So I have found that we have learned a lot and people have taught us a lot, and we're just adamant that COVID's not going to beat us. So if we can keep people safe, there's lots to learn, and certainly lots of opportunity to do business different in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on something there that is the reason why I came up with the idea for this series in the first place. It was, there's undoubted challenges and there's undoubted, some very sad stories you hear about the experiences that people have had. But in order to be able to move forward, it's trying to understand what can everybody who's trying to run a business take positively from this and move forward. So I suppose from that perspective, has the experience over the last 6 months changed your perception of how your business operates, and what sort of changes do you think are going to be long-term changes as a result of this?
I'd be very surprised if there isn't any business that's had to change their long-term view over this. I think the thing for us the thing that rings true for me is it's brought us back to the fact of the people. And many times people say that, I'm just never 100% sure they completely mean it. But we wouldn't have done this right, and we won't be able to continue on unless we're listening to our staff and our participants. And I would say the communication with our staff team and the honesty and the vulnerability that we've been able to show, even for myself as a leader, admitting when you don't know. That's something that when you're in a growth phase, you're probably not as likely to do. But certainly being honest about not knowing what's happening, talking to staff and getting direction from them, because they have a really good steer on what's needed, and listening to what the participants need. And I suppose one of the things that I have found really important was to stay true to your values, because it's really, really easy in an emergency just to dump everything and just go into an emergency mode of doing it. One of the examples of that would be around our work in our catering business to eliminate single-use plastic. And when COVID hit and we looked at flexing our business, it's been very easy just to start getting all those little plastic lunch boxes out like everybody else was and delivering that. And we were we had to remind ourselves what we're about. And every chance we could, COVID aside, we were staying true to our values. So I think that's been the people bit has probably put us in a better position. And I suppose the other part of it is, it's that thing about cash. And when the chips are down, you need the money in the bank, and we've been really working on that financial sustainability. And I think the organisation had done quite a significant bit of work on that on the 6 months prior to it, not knowing that this was coming. So that's really, really helped. And making sure that everybody in the organisation knows that we're all responsible for that, and that's not just the finance team, has been a real help. And that feeling of us all being in it together, I would say I can feel that different in the organisation now, and my job would be to keep that going as we start to come out of that, and not forget that that's what got us through.
Okay, and I mean, you've talked about some of the lessons, and there's lots to be learned. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned over the last 6 months?
Gosh, there's been a number of them, but I would honestly say, me personally as a leader, is about that vulnerability piece, because I'm a highly optimistic person. I like to see the possibilities in everything. I like to know the answers. I like to be able to help. So I'm an absolute helper. People come to me and say, what will we do? I have a tendency to say, well, we'll do this and we'll get it sorted. But what I had to learn quite quickly was just to tell people, I don't know. And I found that really difficult at the beginning, because I thought that was showing that people needed to see strength. But what they needed to see was vulnerability. And some of the feedback, one of the things that we had put in place quite quickly to try and make sure there was good communication was that I do a video talk on a Monday lunchtime for all staff can dial into that. And that's just a way of me saying, here's what I've been doing, this is what the board and I are looking at, here's what we've been working on. And at the very beginning, that was about the emergency things, because things were changing so quickly week to week. And then it became more about keeping people connected, so that the teams that were working from home understood what was happening with the frontline staff and the catering business. And what I found with that, the best feedback has been when people will say, I was really, really worried, and I was listening to the news, and I was not sure what to do about work and home and the kids and whatever, but I knew that if I tuned in on Monday, we were all in this together. And you know what I found, I started to be maybe a bit more honest about the challenges. I'd be in that call, my kids would be climbing over the top of me, or somebody would be crying because they don't want to do a transfer test paper, or you know, my husband, he's working from home as well, he'd be walking about in the background, and people like seeing that I was struggling as well. And I think that honesty and that vulnerability has freed me up a bit to be more me in work, and I suppose maybe made us all feel more as part of a team. And I think that I'd be wanting to continue on that as well. You just don't need to know all the answers, and actually you actually can't know all the answers. It's a collective decision making around that, and I think that's been a real learning for me, and I hope I don't forget it when we get back to whatever our new way of operating will be.
And I suppose then, if you think about, I mean, your business is founded on sustainability, if you like, and investing in local community and giving people opportunities. Yeah. When lockdown initially happened, it forced us all back into our local community that a lot of us had forgotten about, me included. You know, I was a big high street chain shopper. I was a major supermarket shopper. Over the last 6 months, I haven't been in a major supermarket, and it wasn't.
Good on you.
And it wasn't a deliberate decision initially. It was, I'm not prepared to stand in a queue to go to a supermarket, so I started shopping more locally, and I've really enjoyed actually that experience. And even in the clap for carers bit, you know, you ended up speaking to neighbours that you wouldn't necessarily have spoken to, living in the street for 15 years, and some people you'd never spoken to, and all of a sudden you were having conversations with them. Do you think that experience of that rebirth of that community feel, if you like, is something that will continue and will change people's behaviour and going forward, or will we all just revert to type?
Yeah, I just think people really, really need to change. I think one of the things that upset me most during lockdown was when we were getting back with our catering businesses and trying to get things going, that I drove past a really well-known multinational burger chain, and people were queued right down the road. And although people, you know, I completely welcome people's choice, and I think we probably all needed a treat after lockdown, it just really upset me, because I thought the money needs to be invested locally. And we need to really look at how we spend our money and value our money and look at it making a difference. So I always use the example of a mug, where people will buy a mug from a really well-known brand and they'll pay £15 and they'll either buy one at £2 or one at £15, and they'll not really bat an eyelid of it. But when you start talking about it, a local product, they start questioning it. And I think my feeling is that we need to capture this sense of change now, and we need to channel it in, but there's a responsibility for us as business as well to have the right products and have them well enough marketed that people know they're there. But I suppose that sense of community will be there as much as we're in our communities. And I wonder if that whole move around people not really probably going back into the full-time commute will change that as well. I think it's easier to shop locally when you're not out of your house 5 days a week from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6. And it is easier to kind of know your neighbours and think about how you spend your money differently if you have that flexibility. And I think that's one of the things that I would be encouraging. And certainly one of the things that's helped our business in this last month has been the Eat Out to Help Out. I have never, the business is doubled or tripled in those Monday to Wednesday, and that's really, really helped. So I think if we can get that momentum going, and when people come to use your business, they enjoy it and the product's good and they're encouraged to come back. So I think it's a two-way thing. But I would think that whole idea of sustainability isn't just about the environmental bit, it's about buying less but buying quality and buying local. And certainly for me, it's buying social as well.
I mean, you touched on something there. I mean, we were organising the Sustainable Business Conference that was supposed to, which you were participating in, that was supposed to take place in March. And obviously that's now put off, hopefully spring 2021, and we'll be able to put that back on. I found as I was in the process of organising that people's default position whenever you talked about sustainability was environment and recycling. Do you think that the community element and the almost people rediscovering a bit of humanity over the last 6 months will have broadened people's perception of what sustainability actually means?
I'd love to say yes, but I'm not completely sure. I think we have a job of work to connect those dots for people as well, because there is an element of ease of use, and you know, it probably has slowed people down slightly. And I think when you're slower, you have a little more time, you can think of things differently. But certainly for me, even when we were looking at sustainability, there was an element about it to do with recycling. So if you think of loaf, for instance, the year before last, we bought 21,000 plastic bottles and sold them to people, and who knows what happened to them after that. And last year we bought none. We just banned plastic completely right through our catering businesses. That was a really big thing for us. You know, our staff had to reprogram their whole thinking around our product, but they're completely bought into that now, and that is making a difference. But with sustainability as well, it's around sustainability of jobs. So, you know, for us, supporting 1,000 people with learning difficulties, we're really keen on businesses being reflective of the community and giving jobs to people who need them and need to move and to be more financially, I suppose, stable positions, and that kind of idea of inclusion in businesses. And I think as well, there's that piece around product. What is there that people can buy that's sustainable? It's still seen a bit as a middle class thing at the minute. So you have everything you need, and then when you've got enough money, you can start to have the things you want. So we've a bit of work to do around that as well. The throwaway culture is a real challenge, you know, certainly even around clothes and many things that people don't look at reusing them and keeping things. And so it's a big challenge, but I'm up for it. I think we all have to be. And I think it's about showing people how they can do it easily. Like a really good example of that was the families I talked about that we were supporting. When lockdown happened and we realised there was a number of them who were either shielding or quite vulnerable and couldn't get out to the shops. So it wasn't just everybody we did it for, it was the people who were struggling. When we asked them what they wanted, and I don't think this isn't disclosing any confidences, but it was good, you know, frozen pizzas, pot noodles, things that you can make quickly, baked beans, and there's a place for all of those, and there's certainly a place in my cupboard for most of them, but not all the time. And what we realised was that was a staple diet of a lot of our families. So when we looked at that with a sustainability lens, we said, well, we're not in the market of continuing that. We will provide, and we had support from the lottery to help us with that, we'll provide food packs, but those food packs will be food that people can cook, and we will build their capacity by teaching them the recipes. So instead of getting a pan loaf that cost 49p because we bought it somewhere really cheap, we were teaching them how to make bread. Now, they're not going to sustain themselves just on all baked bread. We would have other sliced things, but that idea of teaching people how to cook. And we got a message the other day from a mum who had baked the first lasagna ever for her family. And I think that's something about sustainability as well. And all the banana bread that's been cooked through lockdown by all of us, we would want to keep some of that going, because once you start that, you realise, oh my goodness, that A, it's not that difficult, B, it tastes better, and C, it doesn't cost as much.
And it's rewarding. And
it's rewarding. The only thing is, if there was less calories in it, it might have helped me. But you know, it's that idea of living life differently that I would like to encourage people to do. But if we go back into the grind, we could lose it. So I'm hoping that there will be more of a flexibility and people will continue to have a bit more time.
Thanks to Maeve at Now Group for sharing her lockdown lessons with us. Next up, we'll be at Smurfit Kappa in Lurgan, where we'll talk to their General Manager, Paul Fryer.